Welcome everyone. Today I want to present to you my Smart Roadster Coupe. So first of all, the Smart project started as Swatch car in cooperation with VW. But when Ferdinand Piëch, grandson of Ferdinand Porsche, became VW CEO, he pulled out because he didn't like the idea of a small car with only 2 seats and based on someone else's idea. For him, even a small car must have 4 seats and he felt like VW could do it themselves. And to be honest, the Swatch car also didn't look that great at the time. Right after VW pulled out, Mercedes joined and brought the Smart in production. They designed a small 3-cylinder turbo engine, automated manual gearbox, designed a De Dion rear axle around it, and all this hangs in a subframe which is only connected to the rest of the car with 4 bolts. So Smarts are great for engine swaps, or whole rear end swaps. Now, at the very beginning of the brand, the idea came up to use this concept for a small sports car. So they took the same drivetrain but positioned the passengers lower. That reduced the height and increased the wheelbase of the car. The first concept was presented in 1999, and the later production vehicle looked almost identical. So Smart created a small light roadster with rear-wheel drive, and I, schoolboy at the time, needed to have this car. Now, 30 years after the Swatch car project and 20 years after the Smart Roadster came on the road, we have to say that Piëch was right. Smart never earned money. In fact, Mercedes lost hundreds of millions with the Smart brand. The Roadster was much too expensive, the quality wasn't great, and production ended just after 3 years. In the meantime, VW built the Lupo, even as high-tech 3L version. Check out my other video for more. They built the Fox and now the Up, even as a very popular electric version. All of the VW cars were 4-seaters and they were earning money. Another interesting fact is that the Roadster was produced in Smart's factory in Hambach in France. And can you guess which car is being produced there now? Exactly, the old Land Rover Defender, now as Ineos Grenadier. Daimler founded a new 50-50 joint venture with Chinese car brand Geely and moved production to China, and hence sold their Smart factory in France. And now back to my Smart. So that is my Smart Roadster Coupe. I bought it back in 2009. Actually, that was always my favorite car, my favorite first car, but when I got my driving license, they were still producing the car and it was super expensive. In fact, the problem of this car was always that it was much too expensive for the quality they delivered. And that's also the big difference between the Corvette and the Smart. So the Corvette has been produced since the 1950s and is still produced. The Smart was only produced for 3 years and then they took it off the market again. First, the hype was a lot. People really wanted to have it. But in the end, it was just very expensive and it didn't really work out for them. If you remember that a VW Golf had a base price at the time of 15,000 euro in Germany, and then the Smart Roadster Coupe, so the one with the glass at the back, came out, and it was 20,000 euro base price. So that was just much too expensive for such a small car, such a small fun car, and people didn't really want to pay that. In terms of concept, it's pretty interesting. If you see it from the side here, they took the standard Smart concept, which is actually pretty cool. You have a subframe at the back, you have the engine gearbox and the De Dion rear axle there. De Dion means you have a big U-shaped profile that is connecting left and rear wheel, and we will see that in a minute. And this whole unit is only bolted to the rest of the car with 4 bolts. So you can just take it out like a toy car, put something else inside, put a new one inside. So that's really cool. And instead of sitting kind of on top of that unit, like the 4.2 had, they now placed the passengers in front of it. So that created a longer wheelbase and the car is much lower. As you can see, the height is pretty much the same as at the Corvette, but you're sitting much lower in the Smart. So the Smart is actually the lowest car that I have. Then you have a pretty long wheelbase, which then makes it much more stable at higher velocities. So they're not limited like the 4.2. So this one should drive around 180 kilometers per hour. And the cool thing is that the result is this very light car. So it has like 810 kilograms stock, I think, and mine is a bit lighter, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. So first of all, let's have a look at the brakes and suspension. So my brakes are not stock anymore. These are actually stock discs, but they're just with some holes. And I have different, stronger brake pads. And the rest of the suspension, so the control arms and stuff, is stock. So in terms of body structure, the interesting thing is that both cars are quite similar, and that's why I parked them next to each other. So the Corvette has the base steel frame, and also the Smart has this so-called Tridion steel frame, which is basically what used to be in a different shape, but mine is black and black. So this here is metal, and it goes all the way around here, and also the A-pillar. So that used to be in a different color, but mine is black and black. That's why you can't see it. Also, in terms of color scheme, you can see mine is like an American police car. So I always liked that style since Gran Turismo days. And I always wanted to have a sports car in the livery of an American police car. And that's, yeah, something that I still like. I have this livery now since, I think, well, I have it for 13 years. I was already a couple of times pretty close to removing it, but I still like it a lot, so it's still there, and yeah, still a very nice thing. I get stopped by the police quite often with this car, as you can imagine, but usually everything's fine. They can't really believe that most of it is stuck, so the only thing that's not stock are the springs, so it's 40 millimeter lower. There are also different shocks, but that's not a problem, and they're different rear lights, because I didn't like the original ones. So yeah, police is usually not a problem with this thing. It's just that everyone is looking. No one can really work out what kind of car it is. Pretty often I get the question if that is an electric car. And because also the engine is relatively quiet when it's idling. And yeah, just a very interesting concept. Okay, so in terms of concept, as you can see, you have a trunk in the front, you have a trunk in the back, and that's quite interesting in your everyday life. I was using this car daily for a number of years. I was also commuting with the car from the south of Germany to the north, so 1,000 kilometers every second weekend, and it's absolutely no problem. People told me you can't do that with this car, but it's not an issue. Let's start with the trunk here. So that is a pretty good, pretty huge trunk. You can also get a box of beer inside, which is the most important thing in Germany. And you can fold the soft top into here, and it's the only car in the world, as far as I know, that can like put the roof automatically back, even at top speed. So it doesn't really matter here because it doesn't really go up and stuff and is in the wind. So the roof goes until here. If this thing is down because something is lying here, the roof doesn't fold back. And if it's up like here, then the roof goes until here. You can also reach this, this electric motor here for the roof pretty easily. That's another thing. You will notice that my car is a bit light, or is a bit lighter. It has less covers and stuff. So you can see the wiring loom is open there. I just put some other carpets inside. The center console is different. There are also less like covers in here. And that's because the Smart usually has a very thick carpet in here, so very thick insulation for all kinds of stuff. And for me, the car was just always had too thick carpets. I wanted to have this stuff out here. So I have the pure metal now. And yeah, it's pretty loud, it's pretty rough, but it's also nice. It's what I wanted for this car, because when I bought this car, I already said that I will never sell this car anymore. So you have some like quick fixes, like my like this parking brake here. You can see that the shifter is very different here. You can see that the center console is basically just a emergency solution, but which is now there for almost 10 years because I didn't have time to really finish the interior of the car yet. Also the light here, I just built this myself just quickly to have it, and now it became a permanent solution. I also wanted to have different seats at a certain point, but they look really cool, but they're not really great in terms of side protection and stuff. And here in front, this is the front trunk, which is actually quite big. Under this box is your like your brake system. Of course, we have some nice lights here, but of course we don't use them because that would be illegal. We have a head here, so we can be properly dressed when driving this car. And then you can put the roof side bars in here. I will show you that in a minute, how that works. So the strange thing about the Smart is that you put your key here in the middle. Everyone's always looking here, there's nothing, it's here. So if you start here, so ignition is on. I changed all of these switches. So these are our windows, for example. This is the rear, so heck. So the H is for the rear of the car. R is for roof. So let's put our roof down. So that is the roof down. So if you want to remove this part, you just grab down here, open the handle, and it's out. You can see, you do this, and now we can put it to the front. So you can take this clip out. This clip has 2 holes. Put it on here. Then you slide it in here, and now it's fixed. So you can close that, and the car is now a convertible. So if I remove my self-made carpet here, I can remove that cover, and that's the engine. So that is the engine bay, not the prettiest engine bay. It's a 3-cylinder engine with 698 cc. It has 61 kilowatts, 82 horsepower. It has double ignition. That is one thing that always gets forgotten by a lot of mechanics. So you have the 3 ignition cables here, but actually they're 3 from below as well. So 6 spark plugs. You have so it's a turbocharged engine, probably the smallest turbocharger in the car world. Revs up to almost 300,000 RPM. And this is your intercooler. And of course, intercooler is a really bad position here. That's why you have a fan here. The fan is also on pretty often. The fan is blowing against this cover, so it doesn't really help a lot. Also, the air intake is not great. We will see that in a minute when we see the car from below. And this is your air filter. And actually, among the Smart drivers, there are competitions who can change this air filter as like the quickest. Because it's so super easy. You just have these 4 clamps here, take it out, slide the other one in, that's it. You also have the ECU here. So the ECU is cooled by this air filter case with the air flowing through. So yeah, so that's quite simple. Special about the engine is that it's hanging above the rear axle. So it's in an angle above the rear axle. So the cylinder head is actually behind the rear axle. The crankcase is in front of the rear axle. So that's quite special. And the exhaust is super short because it's only from the turbocharger from the back here to the back of the car. Then here at the end of the car, so at the back of the car, we have these air outlets. You can't really see them if you see the car from the back, but you see them here. It's pretty cool to warm your hands here in winter. It's always warm. So you can just stick your hands inside, the exhaust is just underneath, so this area is always warm. Your rear window is always clear. Interesting is also these side windows are plastic. That's why they have this super bendy shape. And if you want to take the rear end off, you take off these 2 side windows, and underneath are the screws for the bumper. And then the bumper is one large piece. So from the side here, from the air intake, all the way around to the other side. And that's one large piece, and it's the same at the front. So also the front bumper is one large piece. So you can just take it off. It's one big plastic piece holding together with a couple of clips. So that's super simple. Nice is also the doors are super light. So that's an aluminum frame with plastic on the outside and inside, so that's super light. And you can also hear that. And if we look around here, we can see that there are air intakes. They look really cool, but Actually, they are closed. These are the two screws. You also need to take the rear bumper off. On the other side of the car, this air intake is actually open. So only in the upper part, and this is your air intake for the engine. Also here is the ambient temperature sensor, and in winter it's a pretty special thing about the car. When you're driving, the front wheel is getting all the snow up. The snow has been here, is blocking this air intake, and if the temperature in here, so if your ambient temperature gauge in the car shows you a lot higher temperature, then you know that this air intake is actually closed, so then you can stop, open the door, clean that, and then you can continue. So if we have a look underneath the car, we can see that the exhaust is right here. It's very short. You can see the oil filter there, you can see the oil cooler there, and you see this massive pipe there. People sometimes think that that's an exhaust, but that's actually the big U-shaped bar for the DDR rear axle. Where DDR means that you have a rigid connection through this large bar between both rear wheels. So they're always like at the same camber, for example, standing on the ground. So it's a very stable axle, but at the same time, they have one large mounting in the center there, and they have control arms here at the back. So you can see control arms up here. So it's working kind of like an independent rear suspension, but they're still rigidly connected to each other. So that's a big advantage of the DDR rear axle, and Smart is using that. At the front we have McPherson. So the thing about reliability with the Smart is that every car is built to a certain spec. So whenever a part is designed for a car, suppliers or the engineers always want to know how long does it have to last. And I know that there's a wide range of that. Some car manufacturers manufacture or develop cars for up to 200,000 kilometers or 300,000 kilometers for some others. For the Smart, the rumor was always that they are only designed for 100,000 kilometers. Mine has 100,000 kilometers now, and also friends of mine had the same car, and it really broke around that time. And like you could see, the quality of the build is not really great, so it's no surprise if they're really breaking at that time. They usually get some electronic issues, like you could just see the cables are coming off, or there's some oxidation or something like this. So we always get some electronic issues, and then that's the end of it. It's actually a manual gearbox, but it's been automated, so there are actuators on top, and we will see that in a minute when we are driving. So reliability is something to look out for. I never had any issues with the car, but it's definitely something to check. So one of the headlights was cracked and I needed to replace it. If you're looking these headlights up and you're looking for the Smart part number, it's pretty expensive. Like all of this car all around, all the spare parts are not too cheap. But actually I realized that these are just standard Hella lights, so lights that people put on their pickup truck or on the caravan or something. And if you just look for the Hella light, which is exactly the same one, then it's super cheap and it just fits. So that is the new one. So very simple and easy design. So if we take the front trunk out, you can actually see how it looks like underneath here. You can see the cooling package, which is pretty straightforward. Special about the car is that cooling is in front, the whole engine is in the back, so which means that you have a lot of water volume in here, so that takes a bit longer to heat up. There's also a cooling issue with this car that, for example, if the engine is hot and you're sitting in traffic, it's possible that the engine is overheating at the back. The radiator in front is cooling down the fluid, but not enough is coming to the back because the mass flow of the water pump is not enough. So sometimes Smart Roadster drivers need to increase the RPM to like 2000 RPM, so the water pump can pump all the cool fluid from the front to the back. That's sometimes a bit special. Also, you always have to think about where is the fluid actually. So brake is in front, so the brake fluid is here and the washer fluid is here, but then the water for the engine is at the back, the reservoir. Also, steering is an interesting topic here because I have the power steering. You can see it here, but actually this is Smart quality, so that is the minus cable for that. if this goes off, you don't have any power steering anymore, but it's not a problem because the car came standard without power steering. It's absolutely fine. It's not an issue. It's just when you're like parking, it's a bit harder. My car has the power steering, but you don't really need it that much. Another thing you can see here is that the floor is completely closed. It's also closed all the way up until the engine bay, which is pretty cool. And yeah, it's very simple. You can reach everything very nicely and easily. And look at the smart quality. So it wasn't that great, and that's also why the price wasn't really justified at the time. But when you buy them used, it's okay. Next thing is fuel consumption. So the fuel consumption on this car is like 5 liter on like longer autobahn rides at 80 miles per hour, 130 kilometers per hour constantly. I can get away with less than 5 liter, but it's super plus, so it's like 98 octane in our calculations. And so I can get as low as like 4.5 liter. That's like the lowest I can get usually in everyday life. And if I want to have a bit of fun with the car, it's like 5.5 liter. And there's a 35 liter tank, so you can get around 700 kilometers of range. Yeah, so one thing to show here, already talked about it in the Corvette video, but these are all plastic panels and you have these kind of screws. And actually, if we walk over to the Smart, that looks very similar. So that's all plastic, same kind of screws. So the cars are actually quite similar in that respect. Pretty cool is also that the Smart has the standing B-pillar on the door, and another car that has that is the Viper. So in terms of weight, the difference between the two cars is quite extreme. So you can see the Corvette is a much larger car, of course. The Smart has around 800 kilogram. Mine should be a bit lighter because I took a lot of stuff out. And the Corvette is like 1,500 kilogram. So it's almost half. So the Smart is almost half the weight compared to the Corvette. The Smart only has 0.7 liters. The Corvette has 6 liters. So big difference. Both have rear wheel drive. Both are a lot of fun. For the Smart, the cool thing is that whenever you drive, whenever you do anything, if you accelerate, if you brake, if you steer, if you just open the door, you can feel that the car is really light and it's a lot of fun. So you have pretty high cornering speeds with the Smart. And yeah, although the tires are not great on this and I might change to some semi-slicks soon, but already with these standard tires, the grip you get is quite a lot and it's really fun to drive. Like I said, one of the weak points of the Smart is the cooling, because you have the engine in the very back, you have the cooling in the very front, the radiator isn't that big. And then also if you have the front trunk inside, the exit of the radiator is quite blocked. So the mods, if you want to go on a track with this car, are that you take the front trunk out. So there's more room for the front radiator to blow the air out. And at the same time you turn up the heat and you put the window down. Because then you also have enough space with a helmet. Because when I was driving with a helmet on a track with this car, I didn't have enough space for my head with the helmet. So you just better open the roof and turn the heating up, and then you don't have any issues with the car. You can drive forever and it's fine. So how to start a Smart Roadster? First of all, the key buttons break over time, so that's just very thin plastic, and if the key is too old, they just break. So the keyhole is here, and then pretty often people don't really know where to put the key. That's the first thing. Then you need to put your foot on the brake, turn it to the first position, and now it shows you reverse. You can only park the car in reverse if you want to keep a gear inside. And you put it on neutral, and you could hear this interesting sound. That's the spring of the actuator. And now with your foot on the brake, you can start the car. Yeah, so it's a lovely 3-cylinder sound. So listen to that noise. Yeah, so very standard Smart sound. That's the spring of the clutch actuator. Of course you can take it apart and try to get rid of the noise, but it will come back pretty soon. So so you can shift here. So front is up, rear wood is down. You can also shift here. This is downshift, this is upshift. You have your boost pressure here, and you can see right now it's at like in the negative area. 0 is here. We can go all the way up to 1 bar, and this is our temperature. Temperature is always around 82 degrees, that's normal. And yeah, it's pretty simple. And the sound is always nice. So you have the 3-cylinder engine, which doesn't sound too bad, I think. You can definitely hear what the turbocharger is doing. So you always hear this spooling up and down. And you can also hear like a little bird sometimes. So you can definitely feel the low weight all the time. It's amazing which kind of cornering speeds you can reach with this car on these very old standard tires. So that's really cool. When we're just driving slowly, you can always hear what the engine is doing. I mean, obviously because I took all the insulation out, but that's really cool. You can hear a lot what's happening at the back. You can hear the boost. If you suddenly release the throttle, you can hear the reflections at the throttle body. So you hear this little bird like on old Audis. But since I got the second turbocharger already, so since I put the second turbocharger inside, suddenly this voice or this sound is much quieter than before. So originally it was much louder and was even a bit more fun. But now we hear different noises. So also in terms of gearbox, a lot of people were complaining about the gearbox. Actually, if you're used to it and you know where you should put your throttle when you're shifting, then you can drive super smooth. You don't even feel the gear shift. And if you really floor it, if you go to the kick down button, then it really like pushes the gears in. It's not the fastest gearbox, it's probably the slowest automatic gearbox there is, but it's still okay. So if you're getting used to it, then it's not as bad as people say. But of course, if you jump into the car for the very first time, you're driving around for the first time, it can be quite annoying because you don't really know what it's doing. So actually after driving here, you can hear this fan running here. This is the fan for the intercooling. It's always running because the intake temperatures of this car are always too high. You get quite nice clean air here at the side, so into the intake, but then the intercooler is at a very bad position and the intake is from underneath. There's a flap just to shovel air up into the engine bay, but this thing is always the first thing that breaks. Also broke for me, so when I had my driver's training on a racetrack, I got a cone and then the cone ripped this flap off, so now the air intake for the intercooler isn't that good anymore, and so the fan is always on. It's always an issue, so yeah, standard on a Smart. So I hope you liked this video about my Smart Roadster Coupe. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I can answer them later. So see you at the next one.